watching today's teaching from Community Life Church. Open up your heart and see what God might say to you today through His Word.
The rod comes.
Well. I think a lot of people, they were like, last week when we talked about it, we watched it, I was like, man, this is stressful. I mean, my heart started like beating even faster. But I think that this is kind of like a little glimpse of what life could actually look like without Sabbath. We're talking about Sabbath. And not long ago, I was actually talking to a friend, and he was sharing with me that, his house, like not long ago, the sewers start backing up, and then he started checking it out, whatever, and he called the company, and he ended up having to replace the whole sewer line from his house to the city. And I was like, holy cow, that, we were talking about, like the good, the bad, the ugly about house ownership, and if you own a house, you know that it's going to happen, and then he was like, yeah, and then a little bit ago, then when we had this, during the winter time, it was like one of the coldest nights last year. It was so cold, and then his heat stopped working. The same thing happened to him. I was like, holy cow, what's going on, And then when we had like that windy a few months ago, do you remember when it was so windy and all this stuff? A tree in front of his house fell and hit the railing in his main entrance of the house. I was like, holy cow, what's going on, And then when we had all this rain a few weeks ago, do you remember that? Then he sends me a picture of his basement getting sort of flooded, And I was like, man, the way that he was describing it to me was that this house had become an obligation, And for me, I think and when I remember the moment when we bought our house, it was this thing where it was like, you know what, we're going to build equity, I don't know what that means, but it was going to build equity, when they said that. I mean, I know what it means, but at that time, like, build equity, and it was like, you're going to own a house. And when we were signing the papers, they're like, after 30,000 payments, it says in there, the house is actually yours, I was like, yes, it's going to happen, it's going to make it our own. We can paint it and decorate it however we want, and then also planting roots and beyond. And really, for me, when we were having this conversation, for me, made me think that what it was a house was an opportunity, suddenly it became an obligation. The opportunity of having a house, suddenly it turned into be an obligation. And, we are talking about Sabbath. And, if you were not here last week, Renee shared with us, and it was an awesome message about just really about Sabbath. And, for those parents that were here, we actually received some complaints after the sermon last week. Some parents told us that their kids that were here, high schoolers, they didn't want to do any schoolwork on Sunday after church. They didn't want to help pick up stuff because it was their Sabbath. So now, I'm sorry, guys, you need to plan ahead for those youth that are paying attention, you need to plan ahead for your Sabbath, and, that's some homework. So anyway, so our heart for this series is for us to take the Sabbath challenge. And you might be asking yourself the question that we asked last week, what is the Sabbath? What is a Sabbath? So the definition is going to be in the screen, and it says this: a Sabbath is a 24-hour block of time every 7 days in which we stop work, enjoy rest, practice delight, and contemplate God. We stop from all work, paid and unpaid, and embrace our limits as an act of faith in God. And really the concept of Sabbath is a way for us to embrace our limits. It's a way for us, to really realize that our identity is not connected in what we do, but actually our identity is connected in God. And I know that you might be thinking, these guys are crazy. Why are you even saying this? But really, one of the things that God created this on purpose. He created a way for us to realize that He is God and we are not. For a day where we can actually allow God to rule the world without our help. Have you felt like sometimes man, I got to help God, man. I mean, God is not moving quick enough, But you know what? A Sabbath is a moment and a day when we can allow God to be God and to remind us that God can rule the world without our help. So now today what I want to challenge all of us about the Sabbath is this. Is that really like the story that I told you about this house, that, the Sabbath had become a burden instead of a blessing. When God shared and instituted this, it was a way that it was actually really an opportunity, but it had become an obligation. So really my heart today is this. Is that instead of thinking of what had happened of the Sabbath to be, there's these boxes that I need to check and make sure that I'm doing the Sabbath correctly, which that's what it turned out to be, is this. Our heart is this, is that you will consider the Sabbath to be an opportunity, not an obligation. Can you say this with me? Sabbath is an opportunity, not an obligation. There is a part in the Ten Commandments when God instituted this, that He really, if we put the Ten Commandments there, if you think about this, see, the first 3 commandments that God gave to the people of Israel were a relationship between people and God. And then the last 6 commandments is the relationship between people and people, you and others. But here in between, there is this bridge that is called the Sabbath. And for me, it's quite interesting that God puts that in a way for us to remember that He is God, that He can do it without our help, and that also to remember that, He's there to help us. So it's really an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us. So now, let me show you in the text when it talks about the Sabbath. Let's go to Exodus 20, verse 8. And it says this: remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, or your daughter, nor your male or your female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But He rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Do you see here, when God implemented this, it was simple. In a way, it was simply saying, you got to take a day off. That's what you have to do. But then, what it was originally to be something simple, it turned out to be complicated. Are you the kind of person that sometimes overcomplicate things? Are you there with me? I am the first one to say that, And simply, the Jewish leaders started adding all these things of what you should not do in the Sabbath, that became this big thing that they needed to do. So religious leaders start adding extra laws, laws that were not intended to really be done in Sabbath. Instead of taking the opportunity of the Sabbath, it was becoming an obligation. There are some silly laws that were added to the Sabbath. Do you want to hear some of them? One of them was on your Sabbath, you were not allowed to cut flowers or put the flowers on a vase with water. You were not allowed to do that because it was work. Or maybe you couldn't actually separate good fruit with bad fruit. So I imagine the Sabbath, there was a lot of mosquito bugs. Have you seen those? Sometimes in my house, you're kill them. You actually couldn't brush anything. So if you had dirt on your shoes, you couldn't do that. You couldn't clean them up. So my wife would have been upset at me. Then also, you couldn't cut hair or nails. You couldn't apply makeup. Imagine that. I know I wear makeup, but imagine that. You know what I mean? You couldn't braid your hair. I know some people here wouldn't have that problem. You couldn't actually, paint or draw or type. Any of that could actually be considered work. But then this is the one that actually was so challenging for me. Imagine this. It was so religious that you actually couldn't even move your bowels. You know what I'm talking about? Do you understand what I'm saying? You couldn't move your bowels. So whatever you needed to do before and after, you had to work on that. Imagine that. That would be just so hard. I will leave it right there to your explanation because that was considered work. I know, you probably need to drink more water or something. I don't know what it might be. But really, religious leaders made it so heavy that there were all these checklist things that they needed to do in order to do the Sabbath correctly. But here, and what we're talking about today, is that Jesus brings the Sabbath back to what actually the original root was, that the Sabbath is an opportunity and not an obligation. So now, in this story that we're going to talk about in the New Testament, it talks about, there is some different characters on the story. So I want to make sure that you know the characters before I read the story. So the first one are the disciples of Jesus. Disciples of Jesus are really people that were following Jesus for a period of 3 years. And they were really with Jesus, learning from him. They were seeing how he corrected people, how he healed people. And, and it was between fishermen. There were doctors. Some were tax collectors. Other people were just random people there. But really, for 3 years, the disciples of Jesus were following Jesus. Then the other character in this story are actually the Pharisees. The Pharisees, if you don't know who they are, really, they were an influential religious group. They were known to be actually able to interpret the law and tell you how it apply in your life. So in some ways, probably when you read the Bible, they kind of come across a little bossy. They come a little bossy. So just think about the Pharisees. And then there is another guy in this story that his name is King David. King David, he really was an ancient king. That he was a legend from the Old Testament. He was like the Abraham Lincoln, the George Washington of our day. That, you're like, Abraham Lincoln said this, or like you think of stuff like that. That was King David. A lot of the religious leaders talked about him because really he was kind of like the perfect child. Like every family has a perfect child. Like in my family, my sister is the perfect child. She's the one that always got straight A's. She got scholarships, and I did not. So now King David was really a legend. And now the other person, of course, is Jesus. The Son of God is the other character in this story that he really rocks the boat. He's rocking the boat about the Sabbath. He's really bringing to the essence of that the Sabbath was really an opportunity, not an obligation. So let's read the story here. Are you ready for this? A discussion about the Sabbath. One Sabbath day, as Jesus was walking through some grain fields, his disciples began breaking off heads of grain to eat. But the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath? They should not be doing that on the Sabbath because it was work, but they were hungry." Then Jesus said to them, "Haven't you ever heard in the scriptures what King David, did when he and his companions were hungry? He went into the house of God during the days when Abiathar was high priest and broke the law by eating the sacred loaves of bread that only the priests are allowed to eat. He also gave some to his companions." Then Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath." So now here, the followers of Jesus, the disciples, were hungry. We're really hungry. So they are walking in the field, and suddenly they are picking up these grains of stuff to eat. But the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they were like, they are working. They should not be doing that. They should not be doing that. That's not allowed. Because, and then in this moment, Jesus tells the religious leaders, "Hey, do you remember the story about King David? About the guy that you idolize, that it's so important? He actually broke the law. There was this bread that was fresh giving to the temple, and King David went there and he said, 'Hey, I am hungry, feed us to eat,' And I was like, we need to bring that holy bread today. Do you want some? It's fresh. And what I did, I was like, how does this holy bread will look like? And I think in today's world, it will look like donuts. So I have some donuts, and there is two missing because my friend Ben and I, we ate one on our way here. So whoever wants a donut, raise your hand, and I'll give it to you right now. All right, Summer, you're good to go. All right, so this is holy bread, so make sure you eat it. Okay, so grab a napkin, and then take your pick. All right. All right, good job. All right, so someone else, okay, some volunteers. Fritz, he sang too much, so it got him hungry. All right, napkin there. Thank you. All right. Okay, good job. I saw a hand over here. Miss Sarah. All right. Okay, good. Okay, Mr. Thomas, your mom said that you did good this week, so you're getting. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. Just take whatever you want, man. All right. Okay, who else? Raise your hand. We have some holy bread over here. Holy bread. Okay, we have Mr. Hampton. All right. There you go. You got it. Take a napkin. All right. We have more back here. Mr. Ben. Man, he's doubling up. All right. Go ahead, dude. Take it up. All right. All right. So nobody wants the rest. I'll pass them out, Johnny. There you go. You can take them, pass them out. Yeah, you can take them. You can take one. All right. So now, as you're eating the holy bread, in this moment, this is what I would like for you to think about this, is that Jesus is really challenging this situation. When the Pharisees were saying, well, these guys are breaking the law. And then suddenly, Jesus brings it back and saying here the following. Saying, David, if you're really focusing on the law, this is not what the Sabbath is all about. The Sabbath is not about the law, but the Sabbath actually is a gift. And we were not created to be following the Sabbath, but actually the Sabbath was meant to be a gift to us. The Sabbath was meant to be a gift to you and I. It was a gift. And there is actually, even before the 10 Commandments were instituted, there is a part when the Israelites were in a period of 40 years in the desert, when God provided food for them. But there was something that he said, there was one day where he actually provided extra food for them because he wanted to make sure that they rested. It was a gift. And they had a hard time receiving this. And it's in Exodus 16:28. It says this, the Lord asked Moses, how long will this people refuse to obey my commands and instructions? They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. This is why he gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day, so there will be enough for 2 days. On the Sabbath day, you must each stay in your place. Do not go out, pick up food on the 7th day. Do you see that? It was a gift. And even today, the Sabbath, it is a gift to us because it's an opportunity, not an obligation. The Sabbath is an opportunity, not an obligation. As I was preparing for this, I found this story from the old times when, Jewish family, they used to do this tradition. Actually, what they did, they wanted to make sure that their children remembered the sweetness of the Sabbath. And what they did is in the beginning of the day of the Sabbath, they used to grab a spoon of honey and they used to give it to each one of their kids to remember that. To remember that even when they grow up, that the Sabbath was a sweet gift to them. And I know if you're parents, they probably are like, if I'm having a day off, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give sweet to my kids. They're going to be off the wall. Are you with me? Like water, no juice, you know what I mean? Think about it. But also, think that this long time ago, they didn't have what we have access to. For me, I will be like, well, instead of honey, I will be Nutella, a spoon of Nutella or, peanut butter or something if you think about it. But here, imagine the concept of Sabbath, remembering that it was a gift so sweet for us to remember. Because Sabbath is an opportunity, not an obligation. And it started to be a gift, but it started turning into be something so challenging and difficult that they needed to follow that. But Jesus wanted to make sure that we knew that. He wanted to make sure that people knew that the Sabbath was an opportunity, not an obligation. So now, what would it look like to you in your life if Sabbath was not an obligation, but actually an opportunity? What would you do? What things would you actually say, like, this brings me life? That maybe for a specific time, a period of time, you were like, this is what I would really love to do. Maybe it might be something for you to do something active, or maybe for you just to relax, but to know that it's an opportunity. About a year ago, when we started exploring about this concept of Sabbath, one of the things that we did is we actually started challenging our staff. And we were like, hey, we're going to consider about this concept of Sabbath. Are you willing to explore this with us? And we started playing, playing with it, but exploring with this concept of Sabbath. And really, we challenged everybody in our staff to be like, can you give it a try and see if it really helps our life to be better? So now, all of you guys know Sammy Litton. She's part of the Sea Life staff. And, I asked her this morning, hey, will you be willing to share with us? She's also one of our worship leaders. Will you be willing to share with us what has been your experience, doing Sabbath, in this season? So I asked her to share with us. So come on, Sammy. Let's give her a hand. All right, Sammy. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
So, can you just share from your heart, what has been your experience with Sabbath in this season?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about kind of the pain that came with Sabbath for me. It was something that I've been trying to do for like over a decade. Yes, I am that old. I've been working on it for 32. Woo-woo, full adult now. It's awesome. And it's taken me that long to really get a handle on it. And it's something that I actually do. I have 2 kids. I work part-time. I have a house that I have to take care of. I'm a musician. There's a ton of things that happen, but it's something that I wanted to make priority for, partly because of Rod and Renee challenging us. So what was really hard for me was breaking the habits that I had ingrained into my life. That habit that as soon as you sit down, you kind of feel guilty. You're like, what's the next thing that I need to be moving on to? What's the next thing? What do I need to prepare for tomorrow? And that was a painful process for me. It was just all these years and years of trying to find my identity in myself and find my identity in being a super mom, a Pinterest mom, the mom who sews clothes for her children like from scratch and makes bread and like does crock pot meals and all this other stuff and is still a great friend to people and who has great hair and all this crazy stuff. And that's what I had started to find my identity in, rather than finding my identity in being a child of God. And so once I did that, it took a while, and I really had to give myself a lot of grace in the process, because I would start to feel guilty. Like, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do Sabbath. And then if I did something like washed a dish or something like that, I'd be like, oh, man, I broke the Sabbath. This is terrible. I broke God's commandment. And so it involved a lot of grace. And for the first couple of months, really getting into it, I had to give myself a lot of grace, and people around me as well. And so a big part of it, actually doing it, is we do Sabbath on Friday night at 6 p.m. until Saturday at 6 p.m. the following day. I can't do Sunday because I work for the church, so that doesn't work. And resting from paid and unpaid. And we have some cool traditions with my family. And it's just about like setting an expectation for my kids, setting that example that if I'm always busy and if I'm always hurried and I don't make time for God, I sometimes try to fill him in the cracks. Like for Sabbath, one of my big rules is I cannot do any have-to-dos. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I have to get my oil changed. Well, it's Saturday, but like I could worship God while I'm, at the Jiffy Lube. That could totally work, right? And that's not me making time for God and setting apart a time of my life to honor him. That's me trying to do my own stuff and fitting God somewhere in the cracks. And it usually doesn't work that way. So I really had to embrace, let go of my own standards for who I wanted to be, how I wanted other people to think of me as some, really put-together person, which none of us really are. I mean, let's face it. And to embrace God's standards for what he says that I should be, which is a child of God. So.
Well, let me ask you just a question. How has it been a gift to you? Because I know, honestly, it takes a lot of challenge to planning and doing a lot of stuff. And I remember when we were talking, she was saying, sometimes it's just really saying, okay, I'm going to be okay that the dishes are going to be dirty on the sink, and thinking and stuff like that. But really, how has it been a gift to you?
I think it's something that I've really started to look forward to, and it replenishes me. It really does. It's a day of the week where I can rest. I can do things that I'm not good at. Like a lot of times on Sabbath, I'll be like, I'm going to do watercolors. I am not an artist. Like I can't do that at all. But it's something to do just for the pure enjoyment of doing it. It's a day where I just don't have obligations, and I really can enter into that rest. And it makes me a better mom. It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better follower of Christ.
That's awesome. Well, let's give her a hand. Thank you, Sammy, for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Well, now, so this is what I want to just kind of, as we are wrapping this up, if we really believe that God is our creator, and, maybe here you are still questioning where God is placed in your life, but really, if you are really saying, God is my creator, and we believe that he created us on purpose, and he knows what is best for us, maybe it's for us to consider that God created and knows what's best for us. That Sabbath was created as a purpose to help us to remember that he is good, to remember that he can allow us to remember that he's been faithful, that he is going to be faithful. To remember his blessings, to trust him, and so much more. I'm so glad to hear how it's been impactful on Sammy's life. But again, this concept of Sabbath is not a concept of salvation. It's nothing like saying your salvation is in question if you're not really doing this, taking this challenge of Sabbath. But really it's a matter of maybe at times like you have been like I have, that there are times where you're like, man, just my life just goes so quickly. And times going to bed and being like, man, this is so crazy. When is this going to slow down? And I think unless we really make shifts and changes in our lives, it won't happen, And maybe, just saying, this is not a matter of salvation, but really allowing to take the opportunity. And it's not really a burden, but it's really the opportunity to say, okay, God, if you say that this is best for me, I want to give it a try. So now, one of the things that I asked, there was this song that we were listening to that it talked about, breathe, stop, and listen. And before Fritz sing this song to us, really I wanted just to take a minute, just to, speaking from my heart, to share with you guys, that really we have 71 days left until 2018 ends. Imagine this. It's amazing. But let me tell you this. I want to challenge you this morning to give it a try. That maybe once a week you take the Sabbath challenge, what it will be now between the end of the years, to say, I'm going to really carve a time where I'm just simply going to cross any responsibilities and just really be still. It might be for you to be still, it might be to do something that is fun. I was talking to a friend of mine a while back, and he was like, what I need to do is get in my kayak, and I need to go fishing, and I just need to be still. And I was like, wow. That sounds great. I will be terrified of dying. But I was like, I'm not doing that on my Sabbath, But and for me, it might look different. It might look differently to you. It might be for you to bake. It might be for you to go on a long walk. It might be whatever it might be for you. But really, take the opportunity of the Sabbath, because I want to make sure that you give it a try. Because really, maybe that's the key that is missing in your life in this season right now. So we are issuing the Sabbath challenge, and we want to be encouraging you. We have some magnets that we put on the chairs for you to take and put it somewhere. So take the Sabbath challenge that from now until the end of the year, you're going to carve some time once a week, to just spend time with God, to be with him, to rest, to remember that he is God and you're not. So Fritz is going to be singing this song to us, and then Haley will come up and she will close the service. So let's listen to this great song. It's called Breathe.
Alarm clock screaming, got your feet out the floor. It's off to the races, everybody out the door. I'm feeling like I'm falling behind, it's a crazy life. 90 miles an hour, going fast as I can, trying to push a little harder, trying to get the upper hand. So much to do in so little time, it's a crazy life. It's ready, set, go on another wild day, and the stress is on the rise. In my heart I feel you say, just breathe, come and rest at my feet and be, just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is to just breathe. Third cup of joe just to get me through the day. Wanna make the most of time, but I feel it slip away. I wonder if there's something more to this crazy life. I'm busy, 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 and it's no surprise to see that I only have time for me, me, me. There's gotta be something more to this crazy life. I'm hanging on tight to another wild day when it starts to fall apart and the heart can hear you say, just breathe, just breathe, come and rest at my feet and be, just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is to take it in, fill your lungs, peace of God that overcomes. Just breathe. Let your weary spirit rest. Let down what's good and find what's best. Just breathe. Just breathe. Just breathe. Come and rest at my feet and be. Just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is to just breathe. Just breathe.
Thank you so much for watching today. For more information about our church, please visit our website at www.clife.church. We look forward to meeting you soon.